powerful couples don't just make headlines, they create legends. And when it comes to Beyonce and Jay-Z, no amount of success has ever silenced the noise around them. A single blurry photo from the late 90s sparks endless debates about their timeline. A stray lyric becomes proof of betrayal. A rumor whispered on a blog gets passed around until it transforms into a so-called receipt. What makes it even more gripping is how carefully this couple controls their image, moving with near military precision, revealing only what they choose. That level of secrecy doesn't just protect them, it fuels speculation like gasoline on fire. But here's where things get interesting, separating facts from internet mythology. On paper, we know the basics: when they met, when they married, when their children were born. Yet, the internet insists on filling the gaps with its own narrative, spinning contradictions into scandals and coincidences into conspiracies. From resurfaced photos that challenge official timelines to whispered allegations amplified by viral clips, each inconsistency is magnified until it feels like part of a hidden puzzle. This is why their love story, instead of being remembered as private and powerful, is constantly retold as a mystery to be solved. And that mystery is what keeps fans, critics, and conspiracy theorists locked in. Tiny contradictions blow up into global theories, private choices become public suspicion, and disputed claims never seem to die down once they've gone viral. That's why today we're pulling the thread between what's documented and what became internet lore, not to defend anyone, not to accuse anyone, but to understand how a relationship this sealed can generate 100 competing versions of the truth, and why, even decades later, the fascination with Beyonce and Jay-Z's story refuses to fade. We start where every conspiracy starts: the timeline, the dates, the quotes, the photos, and the conflict between them. Every great story begins with a timeline, and in Beyonce and Jay-Z's case, that timeline has never sat comfortably. On record, Beyonce once told 17 magazine that she first met Jay-Z at 18 and only began dating him at 19. Simple, respectable, and perfectly normal. Later, in a high-profile interview with Oprah, she reinforced that narrative, stressing that their relationship started with long phone conversations, months of friendship before any romance. It was the type of slow, steady build you'd expect from two people carefully protecting their image. If this were any other couple, that would be the end of it. But this isn't any other couple. This is Beyonce and Jay-Z, and their story refuses to stay in one lane. Because then, the internet did what it always does. It dug deeper. Old photographs resurfaced, taken during the late 90s Destiny's Child era, showing Beyonce at just 16, standing alongside industry figures like Jay-Z who were already established. Suddenly, that clean timeline didn't look so clean anymore. Adding to the confusion, Jay-Z himself once hinted in a separate interview that he'd known her 10 years back, which would push their first connection into years when she was still a teenager. None of this confirmed an inappropriate relationship, but it cracked open the door of doubt. And once that door opened, the internet rushed through it, demanding answers to questions the couple never seemed interested in clarifying. This is where the conversation takes a darker turn. Online, conflicting details don't just create curiosity, they create accusations. Fans began throwing around the term grooming, pointing to the 12-year age gap and suggesting that phone calls and mentorship could be interpreted as something more sinister. On social media, nuance disappears. There's a huge difference between knowing someone at 16 and dating them, but in the hands of conspiracy culture, those two facts collapse into the same thing. Screenshots, sound bites, and side-by-side images became the new evidence files, reshared and remixed until perception felt like proof. So why does this particular debate grip so tightly? Because the context makes it feel personal. Fans who grew up with Beyonce as a teenage superstar saw her as someone to protect. A young woman navigating fame alongside a man in his late 20s or early 30s creates a power imbalance that audiences can't stop dissecting. Add in the stakes of her career, the mythology of their empire, and the internet's obsession with uncovering hidden truths, and the debate becomes impossible to close. Even if the official timeline is exactly as Beyonce has always said, the existence of alternate narratives keeps the suspicion alive. And once the suspicion is alive, the algorithm guarantees it never dies. If the timeline didn't settle it, The couple's next choice guaranteed speculation, radical privacy. Let's go there. For most people, privacy is about peace of mind. But for Beyonce and Jay-Z, privacy is about power. Their marriage on April 4th, 2008 set the standard. No public announcement, no glossy magazine spreads, and no leaks to the tabloids. The ceremony was so intimate that only about 40 guests attended, phones were taken away, and for years, fans only caught fleeting glimpses of what actually happened. Even today, footage from their wedding feels less like a home video and more like a carefully curated artifact. This wasn't about hiding, it was about building mystique, about creating a blueprint where scarcity equals value. What makes their strategy so fascinating is how intentional it feels. The couple rarely gives interviews about their personal lives, and when they do, it's controlled, brief, and designed to protect more than reveal. Instead, they speak through their art. Beyonce drops entire visual albums like Lemonade, laced with metaphors and coded messages. Jay-Z responds with records like 444, tackling betrayal and reconciliation through lyrics instead of press conferences. Each release becomes both diary and riddle, fueling curiosity while never actually surrendering control. Fans don't just consume the music, they dissect it, searching for the truth between the lines. But here's the paradox. The more tightly you guard your story, the more the world writes it for you. Silence is powerful, but it also becomes a blank canvas. For some, Beyonce and Jay-Z's privacy signals health and maturity. They choose not to let outsiders dictate their narrative. For others, it's suspicious, even damning. Why so secretive? Why so careful? Suddenly, a delayed quote from Beyonce or a vague statement from a publicist becomes a clue in a grand puzzle. The less detail offered, the more weight each fragment carries. And that's how privacy morphs into conspiracy fuel. A single inconsistency, a 2008 interview that doesn't match a 2013 anecdote, becomes more than human error. It becomes evidence. A missing detail in a press release transforms into the missing piece of a hidden scandal. What was designed to protect their relationship, ironically, becomes the very thing that keeps the rumor mill alive. In the world of celebrity culture, privacy isn't silence, it's gasoline. And then, in the middle of that carefully sealed world, came a moment too bright to hide. A pregnancy reveal seen by the entire planet. It was one of the most unforgettable moments in pop culture history, the 2011 MTV Video Music Awards. Beyoncé stepped onto the stage to perform Love on Top, but it wasn't the performance itself that stole the show. It was the moment at the end when she dropped the mic, smiled ear to ear, and proudly revealed her baby bump. In seconds, the crowd erupted. Headlines raced across the world. Millions of fans celebrated as if they were part of the family. For the first time, the most private couple in music had shared something deeply personal, and that vulnerability instantly became a cultural milestone. Months later, the birth of Blue Ivy Carter transformed them into more than music icons. They became the blueprint for Black excellence, family power, and generational wealth. But with fame comes projection. Blue Ivy wasn't just a baby to the public, she became a symbol. Some fans saw her as living proof of love conquering everything. Others tied her arrival to debates about privacy, motherhood, and even industry control. Overnight, a child who hadn't seen the outside world was burdened with narratives larger than life. This is what happens when you're Beyonce and Jay-Z. Every milestone becomes mythology, every personal choice becomes global debate. Then came the music that shifted everything again. Beyoncé's Lemonade hit the world like a bombshell. It wasn't just an album, it was a manifesto. The visuals dripped with symbolism: betrayal, rage, forgiveness, Black heritage, and feminine strength. She never named names, but fans didn't need her to. The story felt both universal and deeply specific, sparking viral think pieces and endless conversations about whether Jay-Z's rumored infidelity was finally confirmed through art. A year later, Jay-Z responded with 444, a raw, stripped-down record that sounded like a man writing footnotes to a marriage scarred by mistakes. It was remorse without spectacle, confession without detail, artistry instead of gossip. And here lies the paradox. Art can be honest, but it doesn't erase speculation. It fuels it. A single lyric about regret can validate years of rumors. A metaphor about Becky with the good hair can launch witch hunts on social media. For some fans, these albums were closure, proof that the couple survived storms stronger than any tabloid headline. For others, they were gasoline, pouring new fuel on old conspiracies and ensuring that the story of Beyonce and Jay-Z would never just be about music again. And where there's ambiguity, there's a megaphone. Daytime TV, podcasts, viral clips, ready to turn speculation into truth. In today's digital culture, scandal spreads faster than truth ever could. Every few months, a new interview, live stream, or talk show segment promises to finally expose everything about Beyonce and Jay-Z. One of the most infamous examples came when a guest appeared on television, making sweeping allegations about the couple. Within hours, clips of the segment were cut, reposted, and shared across Twitter, Instagram, and YouTube, racking up millions of views. For fans watching, it felt like a smoking gun. But what most people never saw was what came next. Corrections, clarifications, and even apologies quietly issued later on. By then, the damage had already been done. The claim had traveled the world while the truth barely left the station. This is the modern rumor cycle in action. Claim first, correction later. The initial sensational video is what grabs attention, fuels conversations, and earns clicks. The cleanup tweet, the retraction buried in a news article, or the edited clip uploaded days later never has the same reach. Viewers are left with impressions, not facts. They remember the drama of the accusation, not the sober correction. In a world where attention is currency, truth often comes last. And that's why Beyonce and Jay-Z's names remain forever entangled in narratives they've already denied. The danger lies in how the megaphone effect transforms speculation into certainty. Once a claim has been blasted through social media, it no longer feels like a rumor. It feels like a premise. A sensational soundbite becomes the foundation for entire YouTube breakdowns, TikTok theories, and Twitter threads. By the time the dust settles, people are no longer asking, "Did this even happen?" Instead, they're already jumping to the next question. Why did they cover it up? The shift is subtle but devastating, because denial now reads like spin, and silence now reads like guilt. And this is how the conversation mutates beyond recognition. It stops being about evidence and starts being about optics. Once you begin with the assumption that a hidden scandal must exist, every move looks suspicious. A vague lyric becomes proof. A quiet public appearance becomes a coded message. A missing detail in an interview becomes confirmation of the very thing never proven in the first place. That's the viral megaphone effect at work. It doesn't just spread rumors, it rewrites the entire frame through which fans view Beyonce and Jay-Z's story. Now we arrive at the rabbit hole at the center of the internet's theory map. The story of Kathy, sometimes spelled Kathy White. Every conspiracy needs a name at its center, and for Beyonce and Jay-Z, that name is often Kathy White. She wasn't a celebrity, but a young PR professional moving in the same entertainment circles, attending the same parties, and showing up in the same photos as industry heavyweights. To those inside the business, she was just another ambitious figure in the background. But to the internet, her sudden death in her 20s, reportedly from a brain aneurysm, wasn't just tragedy. It was a mystery. A devastating personal loss was quickly transformed into the seed of a theory that refuses to die. From there, the internet did what it always does. It built connections where none may have existed. Old photographs of Kathy at events alongside Jay-Z or Diddy resurfaced. Party guest lists were dissected. Blogs pulled together friendship chains and circumstantial details that seemed too close to ignore. A journalist later claimed Kathy had considered telling her side of a story, but passed away just days later. On the other hand, a friend of Kathy's went public to deny the rumors outright, saying she was not pregnant, was in a relationship with someone else, and had even been out drinking and riding roller coasters in the days before her passing. Yet the denial never traveled as far as the rumor. Here's the reality. There is no verified public evidence of foul play. What there is, however, is timing that feels suspicious to those already looking for patterns. In the absence of detail, grief becomes a vacuum, and online speculation rushes in to fill it. People who never knew Kathy White personally began talking about her as though they had front-row seats to her life, adding layers of drama to a story already painful for those who actually loved her. In the process, her memory was reshaped into a conspiracy symbol rather than honored as a human being who passed too young. So how does a theory like this become internet canon? Through repetition. A single blog post becomes a Reddit thread. That thread becomes a YouTube deep dive. The YouTube video becomes a TikTok voiceover, stripped of nuance and repeated like gospel. She considered speaking out becomes, she was about to expose everything. She died of a brain aneurysm becomes, people believe it wasn't natural. By the fifth or sixth retelling, speculation hardens into certainty, and uncertainty becomes proof. The tragic truth may be that Kathy White's death was exactly what doctors reported, a sudden and devastating health event. But the lack of official, detailed explanation ensures that the wild version of the story will live on forever in the corners of the internet that thrive on mystery. Why do certain couples attract conspiracy gravity while others don't? The answer lives in the chemistry between myth and access. The bigger the brand, the bigger the myth, and Beyonce and Jay-Z are the ultimate example of this. They don't just release music, they release cultural events. Their albums come with visuals that feel like fine art exhibits. Their tours are curated like museum experiences, and their interviews are few and far between. Every public appearance feels intentional, like a puzzle piece placed exactly where it belongs. And here's the catch: when everything looks carefully constructed, anything that isn't controlled automatically feels suspicious. To fans, that level of perfection is intoxicating. To skeptics, it's a red flag. That's where the internet steps in. Content creators, bloggers, and self-proclaimed investigators see this vacuum of information as an opportunity. It's easier and more clickable to pitch a so-called hidden truth than to accept that two people simply value their privacy. Algorithms reward the most dramatic version of the story, not the most accurate. And so the narrative shifts. Speculation is packaged as discovery, and theories are presented as if they were facts. The audience, primed to question everything, becomes a willing detective squad, convinced that secrecy must equal scandal. Layered on top of that is the age gap discourse, which always ignites moral debates. A 12-year difference in age wouldn't necessarily raise eyebrows in every context, but when one person is a rising teen star and the other is an established industry figure, it creates a power dynamic that people can't stop dissecting. Online culture loves clean-cut roles, heroes to root for, villains to blame. But real relationships are complex, and real people don't fit neatly into those boxes. That tension between reality and expectation pushes the internet to rewrite the story, turning messy human choices into cinematic scripts. This is the perfect breeding ground for conspiracy theories. You don't need hard evidence to keep them alive. You only need the right ingredients, limited access to the truth, two of the most influential figures in the world, a brand worth billions, and just a few contradictions to latch onto. From there, theories practically grow themselves. For Beyonce and Jay-Z, every silence, every lyric, and every private moment becomes part of an endless investigation. Not because the facts demand it, but because the myth is simply too irresistible for the internet to let go. But if we want to be smarter viewers, we need a filter, a way to hold curiosity without getting played by the hype machine. In a world where rumors spread faster than corrections, the smartest thing viewers can do is learn how to separate signal from noise. Start with what can be verified. When Beyonce herself gives a direct quote in a published interview, or when reputable outlets confirm dates like the wedding in 2008 or the pregnancy reveal at the VMAs, those are solid markers. Think of them as points on a map. And when you connect those points, you start to see a line of truth that's far stronger than feelings, guesses, or out-of-context screenshots. If a claim doesn't match that line, it probably belongs in the noise. The next step is to question who benefits from each version of the story. A TV show thrives on shocking ratings. A YouTube creator wants views and shares. Lawyers trade in facts because their credibility depends on it. A close friend might defend out of loyalty, while a grieving family may choose silence to protect their own peace. Once you understand the incentives behind every narrative, you see why some claims go viral and others disappear quietly. The loudest voice isn't always the truest one. It's often just the one with the most to gain. Finally, remember that not everything that can't be disproven is automatically true. Conspiracies thrive on vagueness, on claims that feel sticky because you can't fact-check them directly. But that doesn't turn them into evidence. Two people can recall a timeline differently without either being guilty of wrongdoing. An album like Lemonade can express universal pain without confirming specific internet theories. A friend can speak honestly while another misremembers without malice. Protecting your empathy is key, because while a rumor may be just content to millions of viewers, for the people living inside that rumor, it's their entire life. And that brings us to the quiet part, the cost of never-ending suspicion on people who didn't volunteer for the plot. Online, a conspiracy is just another headline, meme, or viral clip. But offline, it creates a blast radius that touches real people. Children like Blue Ivy, Rumi, and Sir will one day search their names and find endless speculation about their parents instead of clean memories. Relatives who never asked for fame receive DMs from strangers demanding answers. Even employees, drivers, assistants, stylists are forced to sign strict NDAs just to perform everyday tasks without fear of being dragged into rumor videos. In some cases, even casual acquaintances are suddenly treated like key witnesses, their old memories interrogated by people on the internet who never met Beyonce or Jay-Z at all. Privacy, in theory, is meant to protect that circle. But with a couple this famous, privacy often backfires. The tighter the walls, the louder the outside voices get. If Beyonce and Jay-Z reveal nothing, fans build everything. If they reveal just a little, people assume it's a distraction. And if they open up more fully, critics dismiss it as polished PR. It becomes a paradox where every choice, whether silence or disclosure, feeds the speculation machine. That's the cruel irony. The very boundaries meant to protect their family are also what fuel endless online storytelling. And so, no answer ever really wins. That's the trade-off when your art belongs to the world, but your private life still belongs to you. Beyonce and Jay-Z can set boundaries, but they can't force strangers to respect them. They can control their narrative through albums, visuals, and carefully chosen interviews, but they can't stop the internet from creating alternate versions of their story. For the couple, the cost of being legendary is living with a story that never ends. And for the public, the challenge is deciding whether to consume that story responsibly or to let curiosity turn into cruelty. So where does that leave us? With a choice: believe the loudest or learn to be comfortable with not knowing everything. At the heart of it all lies a paradox. The same secrecy that protects Beyonce and Jay-Z is the very thing that fuels the world's obsession. Maybe the mystery is their greatest shield, keeping outsiders at bay and preserving their family's peace. Or maybe it's the magnet that keeps pulling the internet back, determined to fill in the blanks with its own version of events. Their careers have been built on precision and control, albums released like cultural earthquakes, visuals staged like monuments, and personal lives sealed tight like a locked room with only a tiny window. And when the door stays shut, people can't resist imagining what's behind it. What we do know for certain is simple. The documented timeline remains the foundation. Beyonce's own words, Jay-Z's public statements, the wedding date, the VMA pregnancy reveal, and the birth of their children. These are verified milestones. Their music offers confession through craft, but not courtroom evidence. It's art that captures emotion, not sworn testimony. Everything else, the speculation, the blind items, the online theories, lives in that uncomfortable space between what fans desperately want to know and what the couple refuses to share. And that gap is where the internet thrives. Theories will continue to surface. Corrections will continue to arrive late, often unseen. For those who admire Beyonce and Jay-Z, the challenge is learning to hold two truths at once. Curiosity is natural, but privacy is still allowed. Respecting boundaries doesn't erase intrigue, and intrigue doesn't have to become cruelty. In the end, maybe that's the real legacy of their relationship, not just the music or the empire, but the reminder that even in an age of oversharing, some mysteries are meant to remain mysteries. If this conversation showed anything, it's that silence is powerful. But once the internet decides it knows your truth, the conversation doesn't stop when you do. So what do you think? Does mystery protect what matters, or guarantee that the story never ends? Drop your thoughts below. Thanks so much for watching. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button, turn on notifications, and drop a like if you enjoyed the video. It really helps the channel grow and makes sure you never miss the next upload.